Good day. The topic I will discuss is the International Classification of External Causes of Injury, or ICECI. The WHO Constitution mandates the production of international classifications on health so that there is a consensual, meaningful, and useful framework which governments, providers, and consumers can use as a common language. The WHO family of international classification is composed of three main types of classification. 1. Reference classifications are the main classifications covering the essential and basic parameters of health. It includes the International Classification of Disease, the International Classification of Functioning, Disability, and Health, and International Classification of Health Interventions. The second classification are the derived classifications, which are based on the reference classifications. It is designed to provide additional detail beyond that provided by the reference classification for a specialized purpose. The third are the related classifications that connect to or overlap with reference classifications. It describes important aspects of health or the health system not covered by the reference or derived classification. This includes the International Classification of External Causes of Injury. ICECI has been developed as a related classification with respect to ICD-10, Chapter 20. It has a complementary role to ICD. ICD deals with classification of disease and only Chapter 20 deals with external cause of injury. ICECI is a more detailed and flexible classification of external causes of injury. ICD is used for international reporting of mortality and is used to classify hospital inpatient cases. The ICI, as a specialized system focusing on external causes of injury, enables more detailed and flexible classification. It can be used in many settings, including emergency department, clinics, inpatient hospital settings, surveys, and specialized mortality registration systems. Since it includes the external causes and not the injuries itself, ICECI does not replace Chapter 20 of ICD-10. During the second half of the 20th century, statistical information about factors contributing to the occurrence of injury cases was often recorded using the external causes classification of ICD. Injury research and prevention experts have argued that the ICD classification lacked the scope, specificity, and flexibility needed to inform many injury prevention and control activities adequately. Beginning in the early 1990s, international meetings on injury surveillance methods were held under the auspices of WHO. It was recognized that systems that classify external causes of injury had strong similarities in different parts of the world. By the mid-1990s, this led to the conclusion that it was feasible and desirable to develop an internationally harmonized classification of external causes of injury. Work towards this aim commenced soon afterwards and ultimately resulted in the ICECI, or International Classification of External Causes of Injury. This classification underwent several revisions from March 2001 to July 2004, with the present revision as version 1.2. The International Classification of External Causes of Injury is a system of classifications that enables systematic description of how injuries occur. It is designed especially to assist injury prevention. The purpose of the ICECI is to classify external causes of injuries. It is designed to help researchers and prevention practitioners describe, measure, and monitor the occurrence of injuries, such as answering the questions: where did the injury occur? How and under what circumstances did the injury occur? And which products were involved in the injury event. The ICECI is organized into modules and data items or variables. The core module includes 7 items. Additional modules include violence, transport, place, sports, and occupational. As seen in the table, the additional modules are related to specific data items of the core module, providing more details to the circumstances of the injury event. For example, the violence module is related to the intent data element of the core module. Sports and occupational module provides more detail to the activity data element of the core module. The core module includes a set of variables which were chosen to provide a good overview of the external causes of injury cases in general. It has 7 data elements or variables. Intent is the role of human purpose in the occurrence of injuries. This can be sometimes difficult to determine, but is important for developing strategies for intervention. Mechanism, full and short version, records how the injury came about. Objects, substances, records what types of things were involved in this process. Place gives insight into where the injurious event occurred. Activity is a type of activity being undertaken by the person when injured. Alcohol use and abuse and certain psychoactive drugs are important risk factors for injury. Each variable of the core module has its own alphanumeric code. For example, mechanism of injury codes C2. Each item in a variable has its own required field length, where n stands for numeric digit. The number of n's indicate the maximum field length or number of digits. Intent is defined as the role of human purpose in the injury event. It is primarily determined by the incident and not by the resulting injury. The number of digits needed for classification are 2 digits. The following are the items or data element included in the variable of intent. Unintentional is defined as an accidental injury event. Intentional self-harm is a deliberate intent to cause harm, injury, or death against oneself. It includes suicide and self-mutilation. Assault includes injuries sustained by a bystander to a violent incident. Other violence includes 4.1 or legal intervention used by law enforcing agents to enforce the law, and 4.2 violence secondary to operations of war or civil conflict. In the following scenario, a policeman arrests a robber. This has a code of C1 4.1. Mechanism of injury is defined as how the person was hurt or the way or process in which the injury was sustained. It has a full or short version. Injuries are often the result of a sequence of events. Different types of mechanisms are usually involved in the injury. Underlying mechanisms are those involved at the start of the injury event. Direct mechanisms are those producing the actual physical harm. And intermediate mechanisms are other mechanisms involved in the injury event. The number of digits needed for classification are 4 digits. The following are the data elements included in the mechanism of injury. The direct and underlying mechanisms may be the same. For example, if a person cuts his or her finger with a knife while preparing food, the cutting of the finger is both the direct and underlying mechanism. Code is C2 for mechanism of injury 2.1.3, where 2 is for piercing, penetrating force, 2.1 is scratching, cutting, tearing, and 2.1.3 is cut, slice, slash with a knife. Other situations are more complex. For example, if a man trips over an appliance cord and hits his head on a wall, the tripping over the cord is the underlying mechanism, that is the action that starts the injury event, and the contact with the wall is the direct mechanism, which is the action that causes the actual physical harm. Code for underlying mechanism is C2 1.5.1, and code for direct is C2 1.2.2. Code the underlying mechanism first, followed by the direct mechanism. Because injury events often involve more than one mechanism, and because the sequence of events leading to an injury is not always clear, identifying an underlying mechanism of injury may be difficult. C3 is the code for object or substance. Object is matter, material, or thing involved in the injury event. Injuries are often the result of a sequence of events. Three types of objects or substances may be involved in the injury event. Underlying object, substance are the objects involved at the start of the injury event. Direct object, substance produce the actual physical harm. Intermediate objects, substances are other objects or substances involved in the injury event. The number of digits needed for classification are 6 digits. The following are some items included in the classification scheme of objects producing injury. In the example of a person cutting his or her finger with a knife while preparing food, the knife is involved at the start of the injury event, and it is the object that produces the actual physical harm. The direct and underlying object is the same. Code is C3 8.01.05. C3 for object and 8.01.05 is for the kitchen knife. Other situations are more complex. In the example of a man tripping over a cord and hitting his head on the wall, the appliance cord is the underlying object and the wall is the direct object. Code for underlying object is C3 7.98.01 and direct object is C3 14.04.99 since the wall was unspecified. In some situations, several objects can produce injuries. In the case of a car crash, there may be an underlying object, for example, the tree that the car hit, and several direct objects such as the steering wheel, seat belt, and the windshield. Each of the direct objects may cause different injuries. Code for the underlying object is C3 13.01.03 and the code for the direct object would be different for each specific object that caused the injury. The place of occurrence is where the injured person was when the injury event began, not when the injury event ended. The number of digits needed for classification are 3 digits. The following are some items included in the classification scheme of place of occurrence. There are 2 coding levels, the second level being more detailed, but not all places have a second coding level. To code, select the place where things started to go wrong. Choose a category referring to the whole entity within which an injury occurred, rather than a category referring to only a part of such an entity. For example, if an injury occurred while being in the swimming pool in a holiday park, code place of occurrence as holiday park C4 10.5 rather than the swimming pool, which is C4 5.3. If more than one injury is involved, select the place associated with the more severe injury. If the injuries are equally severe, select the place that appears first in the code list. Activity when injured is defined as a type of activity the injured person was engaged in when the injury occurred. Being able to identify injuries that occur while a person is working or injuries that occur while playing a sport may help guide development of more effective prevention strategies. The number of digits needed for classification are 3 digits. The following are some items included in the classification activity when injured. The following are guidelines in coding activity when injured. Select the category that best describes the activity the injured person was engaged in when the injury occurred. If 2 or more activity codes are judged to be equally appropriate, select the one that comes first in the code list. Alcohol use is defined as suspicion or evidence of alcohol use preceding the injury event by the injured person and or other persons involved in the injury event. No distinction is made between suspicion, that is, patient smells of alcohol, and evidence, that is, blood or breath alcohol levels, because criteria for each category is too difficult to define. This item is coded for each injury case, regardless of the severity of injury, age of the injured person, or intent of the injury event. Psychoactive drug use is defined as suspicion or evidence of psychoactive drug use For example, use of opiates, cocaine, amphetamines, cannabinoids, sedatives, or hypnotics, or other psychoactive substance use, such as hairspray, gasoline, glue, preceding the injury event by the injured person and or other persons involved in the injury event. No distinction is made between suspicion that this patient has injection marks and evidence that his blood or breath drug levels because criteria for each category is too difficult to define. Code this item for each injury case regardless of the severity of injury, age of injured person, or intent of the injury event. Now, let us discuss the additional modules for ICECI. The violence module provides additional information for the intent data element of the core module. It consists of 7 data elements or variables. To explain some of these data elements, V1 or proximal risk factors for intentional self-harm is defined as the most recent crisis that led to the self-harm incident. This includes conflict in relationship with family member, death of a relative, physical problem, psychological or psychiatric condition, financial problem, or abuse. V3 or victim-perpetrator relationship is the relationship of the person committing the violent act to the injured person. For example, the perpetrator can be the spouse, parent, other relative, or a stranger. V5 or context of assault is the circumstances or reasons surrounding the violent injury event, such as an altercation, drug-related, gang-related, or sexual assault. V6 or legal intervention includes physical or other forces used by law enforcing agents, including military on duty, in the course of arresting or attempting to arrest lawbreakers, suppressing disturbances, maintaining order, and other legal action. This includes traffic pursuit, drug raid, and legal execution. V7 or type of conflict is defined as a type of war or civil conflict occurring when the injury happened, such as civil war, terrorism, or civil insurrection. The intent data element of the core module determines which of the components or data element of the violence module should be coded. For example, for the intent variable intentional self-harm, V1 or the most recent crisis that led to the self-harm, and V2 or any previous suicide attempt should be indicated. For intent variable assault, the relevant data element in the violence module includes V3, victim-perpetrator relationship, V4, sex of perpetrator, and V5, context of assault or the circumstances of reasons surrounding the violent injury. What was the relationship of the perpetrator to the victim? Was the assault secondary to a robbery, a drug-related incident, rape, revenge? Answer to these questions add more detail to the injury event that occurred. For intent variable violence due to legal intervention, the relevant data element in the violence module is the type of legal intervention. Was the injury secondary to violence due to a traffic pursuit, family dispute, drug raid, or any form of corporal punishment? The transport module provides basic information about transport-related injuries. A transport device, such as land transport vehicles, watercraft, and aircraft, must be involved in the injury event. The transport module has 4 data elements. Mode of transport is defined as the means by which the injured person was traveling from one place to another, or if not traveling, what he or she was doing at the time of injury in the context of a transport event. Role of the injured person is defined as how the injured person was involved with the specified mode of transport at the time of the injury event, such as bystander, driver, or passenger. Counterpart is the other vehicle, object, person, or animal with which the injured person or the vehicle in which the injured person was traveling collided. Type of transport injury event is defined as the general nature of the transport injury event, such as a traffic injury event, an air or water transport crash collision. All 4 data elements must be coded. The place module provides more detailed information about where the injured person was when the injury event began. The module consists of 7 data elements which are related to the place of occurrence codes. The 7 elements of the place module are listed in the table shown, along with the place of occurrence codes to which they relate. The place of occurrence dictates what element of the place module should be detailed. For example, in the place of occurrence home, details of the following elements of the place module are added, such as P1, did it occur inside or outside the house? P2, what part of the home did the injury occur? Was it in the bathroom, kitchen, bedroom? P3, what type of home was it? Was it a detached house, apartment, boarding house? And P4, who is the occupant of the house when the injured person was when the injury event occurred? For example, the injured person had an injury in his own home. The injured person had an injury while visiting a friend's house. The sports module provides additional information about what the injured person was doing when the injury occurred. It adds details about sports-related activities the injured person was engaged in. It has 4 data elements. Type of sports, exercise activity, is the specific sport or exercise in which the injured person was engaged at the time of injury. Phase of activity is the phase of the sport or exercise activity during which the injury occurred, such as warm-up phase, competition, or cool-down phase. Personal countermeasures are equipment used or worn by a participant to protect against injury, such as braces, paddings, splint gloves. And environmental countermeasures that are used in the competitive or recreational environment to protect against injury, such as protective padding on competition surfaces, safety restraints, or padded goal posts. Occupational module provides more information about the circumstances and setting of injuries that occur while a person is performing paid work. Paid work is activity for which a person is paid or expects to be paid a salary or other monetary income. It consists of 2 data elements, economic activity and occupation. Economic activity is a type of industry or business the injured person was working at the time of injury. Examples are agriculture, fishing, mining, real estate, health, or social work. Occupation is a type of paid work the injured person was engaged in when the injury event took place, such as professionals, technicians, service workers, and the like. The Iceci is multi-axial, modular, and hierarchical. The multi-axial structure of the Iceci enables numerous factors to be recorded independently of one another. For example, coding of objects or substances involved in the occurrence of an injury is possible irrespective of how or whether other items have been coded, such as intent. The modular structure of the Iceci groups together sets of items which are likely to be used together. This enables the Iceci to use its full form, that is, using all items in all modules, all at their most detailed coding level, or parts of the Iceci can also be used when that is more convenient. For example, the core module includes items that are generally useful for injury surveillance. The sports module includes items that might be used when sports injury is a special focus of a data collection. A data collection with a more general purpose might omit the sports module, opting to rely on the less detailed coverage of external causes of sports injury provided by the core module. The hierarchical structure of items in the Iceci allows users to choose from up to 3 levels of detail for data collection and reporting. The level used can differ between items and modules. The modular and hierarchical structure of the Iceci is designed to allow users to select components to fit their needs, resources, and capabilities. In summary, I have discussed the history of the Iceci and its relationship to ICD-10, its importance to help researchers describe, measure, and monitor the occurrence of injuries cannot be overemphasized. The two main contents of this classification, core and additional modules, were extensively discussed with examples given to emphasize important points. Information collected from this classification can affect patient care and guide efforts to prevent injury recurrence. Thank you.